On September 10, 2025, Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah, became the center of national attention. A crowd of more than 3,000 people had gathered outdoors to hear from Charlie Kirk, conservative activist and co-founder of Turning Point USA. At just 31 years old, Kirk had become one of the most recognizable faces in the American conservative movement. His American Comeback Tour was billed as a series of fiery campus debates, part rally, part Q&A, all designed to spark discussion and draw in young people. But what was meant to be another stop on that tour ended in violence. As Kirk engaged with questions from students, a single shot rang out. Witnesses described a moment of confusion followed by panic. Kirk collapsed on stage, struck by a bullet fired from nearly 200 yards away, from a rooftop overlooking the event. He was rushed to Timpanogos Regional Hospital, but within hours, doctors confirmed what many feared. Charlie Kirk had not survived. Welcome. I'm the Archivist, and this is True Crime Stories, pulling threads of truth from the darkest knots. Here we preserve the record, dust off forgotten files, and follow the evidence wherever it bleeds. No rumors, no fluff. Just a case, the victims, and the facts that refuse to stay buried. Welcome to the Charlie Kirk case. To grasp how shocking this was, it helps to understand the broader setting. Utah Valley University, or UVU, is one of the largest public universities in Utah, with a diverse student body and a tradition of hosting visiting speakers. The outdoor event space chosen for Kirk's speech was meant to reflect accessibility, a symbolic decision that anyone, regardless of viewpoint, could attend and ask questions. The security setup was visible but not overwhelming. Like many campus events, there were uniformed officers nearby. But the organizers leaned into the atmosphere of open debate rather than treating it like a high-risk political rally. This openness, while appealing to students, also left vulnerabilities that would become tragically clear. Charlie Kirk's American Comeback Tour was itself more than a lecture circuit. It was a carefully crafted campaign to re-energize conservative youth. He had planned to visit dozens of colleges nationwide, sparking viral moments from live Q&As. His strategy relied on confrontation, drawing sharp questions from ideological opponents and responding with quick, cutting remarks. The Utah stop was the tour's kickoff, a stage meant to generate attention and momentum. So when a fatal shot cut through the event, it didn't just strike one man. It reverberated through the movement he built, the university hosting him, and the nation at large. It became more than a crime scene. It became a symbol of how fragile public discourse had become. To understand the shock this caused, it's important to understand who Kirk was. Born in Illinois, he grew up with a passion for politics and communication. In his late teens, he co-founded Turning Point USA, which quickly grew into a powerhouse in youth politics. His organization specialized in hosting conferences, debates, and media campaigns, all pushing conservative messaging. Kirk was known for being sharp, quick-witted, and unafraid of controversy. He thrived on taking questions from opponents, sometimes clashing with students and activists on issues like gender identity, race, and immigration. For his supporters, he was bold and uncompromising. For his critics, he was divisive and inflammatory. But love him or hate him, Charlie Kirk had carved out a prominent place in America's political conversation. Kirk's rise was meteoric. In 2012, at just 18 years old, he gained national attention with an essay arguing that conservative voices were being silenced on college campuses. That appearance on Fox Business put him on the radar of donors and political strategists. By 2016, Turning Point USA had chapters on hundreds of campuses, with a multi-million-dollar budget supported by wealthy conservative backers. His style was unique. Unlike traditional politicians, Kirk wasn't seeking office. His stage was the lecture hall, his arena the debate floor. He cultivated viral moments, often posting clips of himself taking on hostile questions, then amplifying them on social media to millions of followers. This mix of live confrontation and online amplification turned him into both a political influencer and a cultural lightning rod. Outside of politics, Kirk wrote books, hosted a popular podcast, and became a regular guest on cable news. He often presented himself as a defender of free speech, portraying universities as battlegrounds in the so-called culture war. While critics accused him of oversimplifying complex issues, supporters saw him as cutting through political correctness to defend traditional values. By 2025, he wasn't just an activist. He was a symbol. To some, he represented a generation of conservative youth finding their voice. To others, he embodied the polarization that had split the country in two. Either way, Kirk's presence at Utah Valley University that day carried enormous symbolic weight. He was more than a guest speaker. He was a national figure whose words and actions drew scrutiny far beyond the campus where he stood. September 10th. The event had started. Speeches, audience interaction, questions. One student, Hunter Kozak, asked, "How many transgender Americans have been mass shooters over the last 10 years?" Charlie responded, "Too many," followed by, "Counting or not counting gang violence?" These were among the final public words before the attack. At approximately 12:23 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time, while Charlie was still on stage outdoors, eyewitnesses heard a shot. Kirk was struck in the neck. He was rushed to Timpanogos Regional Hospital, but later was confirmed to have passed that afternoon. He was 31. Immediately after the shooting, law enforcement declared it a serious public security crisis. A massive search launched. Local police, Utah state authorities, federal agencies involved. Public warnings, lockdowns, campus evacuated. The timing of the event was deliberate. Kirk's team had promoted the Utah stop as the kickoff to his American comeback tour, meant to set the tone for the rest of the campaign. The atmosphere in Orem was charged but not hostile. Supporters cheered his lines, while detractors lined up for pointed questions. It was classic Kirk. High energy, confrontational, designed to generate viral moments. But the security challenges were obvious. Unlike a private rally, this was a public campus event. The outdoor setting meant there were numerous sightlines, rooftops, and windows within range, while uniformed officers were present. The open-air design left vulnerabilities. Few could imagine, however, that those vulnerabilities would be exploited in real time. When the shot rang out, witnesses reported confusion. Some thought it was a firework. Others believed it was a sound system malfunction. It wasn't until Kirk collapsed that the gravity of the situation became clear. Students screamed, staff scrambled to shield others, and officers rushed toward the stage. Panic spread as thousands tried to exit at once. Paramedics were on the scene within minutes, applying pressure to the wound and racing Kirk to the nearest hospital. News traveled almost instantly, first by word of mouth and social media, then breaking alerts from local outlets. Within half an hour, the story had reached national attention. Cable news interrupted regular programming. Headlines read, "Charlie Kirk shot at Utah Valley University." The shooter had positioned himself with precision. Investigators later confirmed that the rifle was fired from a rooftop approximately 200 yards away, offering both distance and cover. The vantage point suggested planning. This was not a random act. but a carefully chosen location that allowed the attacker to remain hidden in the moments before and after the shot. For the thousands in attendance, the experience was surreal. One moment, they were part of a spirited debate. The next, they were witnesses to a national tragedy. For Utah Valley University, a school not typically in national headlines, the campus was suddenly thrust into the center of a crisis that would dominate coverage for weeks. The manhunt that followed was immediate and intense. Local police, state authorities, and federal agents all joined in. Roads were monitored, neighborhoods searched, and surveillance footage reviewed. The suspect had chosen his vantage point carefully, a rooftop nearly 2 football fields away. Investigators scoured the scene, recovering shell casings and eventually a bolt-action rifle that they tied to the attack. Within hours, they had a name: 22-year-old Tyler James Robinson. The evidence piled up quickly. DNA linked him to the weapon and items left at the scene. Digital evidence, including a note and text messages, suggested planning. But the way Robinson actually entered custody was just as remarkable as the attack itself. Authorities have confirmed that Robinson's father recognized his son from the images circulating after the incident. When confronted, Tyler admitted to his father what he had done. In a tense and emotional exchange, he reportedly told his parents he didn't want to face police and considered ending his own life. His father, along with a trusted family friend who was a retired deputy, persuaded him to surrender. Together, they drove Tyler to the Washington County Sheriff's Office in Hurricane, Utah. There, late in the evening, he turned himself in. In the end, Tyler Robinson was not captured in a standoff or dragged from hiding place. He was delivered by his own father. For many, that detail underscores the tragedy of this case. A young man's family, forced into the unimaginable position of turning in their son. The nature of Robinson's arrest added a deeply human layer to an already devastating story. Law enforcement credited his father's courage and sense of duty with preventing further violence. Had Robinson chosen to resist, the manhunt could have dragged on for days, potentially putting more lives at risk. Instead, the voluntary surrender meant that investigators could quickly begin gathering statements, cataloging evidence, and presenting charges to the court. For his family, however, the surrender was not a triumph but a heartbreak. Robinson's parents were suddenly cast into the public spotlight, not as supporters of a cause, but as a mother and father of an accused assassin. Interviews with relatives painted a picture of a young man whose political views had grown increasingly extreme, leaving his family bewildered and fearful. The act of turning him in was described as the most painful decision of his father's life, yet one he felt was necessary to uphold both justice and public safety. The image of Robinson arriving at the sheriff's office alongside his father became symbolic. It highlighted the tension between private love and public duty. For investigators, it provided closure to a frantic search. For the public, it raised questions about what warning signs his family had seen, what pressures they had felt, and how many other families quietly wrestle with the radicalization of loved ones. From that moment on, Robinson was in state custody, facing charges that would determine the rest of his life. The details of his surrender set the stage for one of the most closely watched trials in recent memory. A trial that would not only probe the facts of a crime, but also the moral choices that ripple outward in its wake. Prosecutors wasted no time filing charges. Robinson faces counts of aggravated murder, unlawful discharge of a firearm, obstruction of justice, and committing a violent offense in the presence of a child. Utah prosecutors have said they will seek the death penalty, citing both the political targeting and the presence of minors in the audience as aggravating factors. Robinson is being held without bail as the legal process unfolds. The speed of the charges reflected how seriously the state was treating this case. Within just a few days, prosecutors had assembled enough evidence, physical, digital, and testimonial, to frame Robinson not only as the shooter, but as someone who acted with intent and planning. Each charge carries specific weight. Aggravated murder is the most serious, reserved for killings committed with intent and under circumstances that make the crime particularly heinous. In Utah, this includes targeting public figures, committing acts in front of children, or carrying out crimes that threaten the broader community. The aggravated element is also what allows prosecutors to pursue the death penalty. The charge of unlawful discharge of a firearm relates directly to the danger Robinson created beyond his intended target. Firing into a crowd of more than 3,000 people posed a grave risk to many others, something prosecutors are certain to emphasize. Obstruction of justice reflects attempts Robinson allegedly made to hide or dispose of evidence and to cover his tracks digitally. Investigators noted that some of his devices showed signs of wiped files or attempts to delete chat logs, actions that prosecutors argue reveal consciousness of guilt. Finally, committing a violent offense in the presence of a child may at first seem unusual, but it highlights the fact that minors were in the audience that day. For the state, this elevates the severity of the crime even further, underscoring the lasting trauma inflicted not only on adults, but also on young witnesses. By announcing their intention to seek the death penalty, prosecutors placed the case in rare company. Utah has pursued capital punishment sparingly in recent years, but they argued that the targeting of a political figure in a public forum constituted an attack not just on one man, but on democratic life itself. The move immediately sparked debate. Supporters of the death penalty saw it as justice for an act of political violence, while opponents argued it risked turning a trial into a symbol rather than a pursuit of accountability. As Robinson sits in custody, denied bail, the legal battle ahead promises to be long and complicated. His defense will likely challenge both the interpretation of evidence and the decision to seek the death penalty, setting the stage for one of the most high-profile trials Utah has seen in decades. The question now is motive. Why would a 22-year-old take aim at a public figure in such a calculated way? Investigators point to several pieces of evidence. Robinson left a note before the attack, expressing anger at what he saw as hateful rhetoric. He also sent text messages to his partner, admitting his intent and referencing Kirk directly. Digital footprints suggest he scouted the venue and planned the shooting in advance. At the same time, leaked Discord chats complicate the picture. In them, Robinson reportedly admitted the act, but also expressed regret and confusion. Some messages seem contradictory, raising questions about his state of mind. Was this purely ideological? Was it personal? Or was it a mixture of both? Prosecutors have emphasized the importance of these digital traces, calling them a window into Robinson's mindset in the days leading up to the shooting. The handwritten note, for example, was said to be short but emotionally charged, outlining grievances against Kirk's public statements on identity and culture. Investigators argued this demonstrated clear premeditation, not a spontaneous decision, but one that had been mulled over and prepared for. The text messages to his partner are even more revealing. According to court filings, Robinson allegedly confessed both the intent and the action in near real time. In one exchange, he suggested he could not stand to hear Kirk's message any longer, framing the act as, in his mind, a response to speech he found intolerable. These details, prosecutors argue, tie the shooting not just to anger, but to an attempt to silence a voice he opposed. Forensic analysis also uncovered that Robinson had searched online for information about the event schedule, maps of Utah Valley University, and even ballistic calculations consistent with long-range targeting. To investigators, This suggested a chilling level of planning, one in which the choice of weapon, position, and timing were all carefully weighed. But the leaked Discord conversations complicated the prosecution's straightforward narrative. In those private chats, Robinson's tone shifted. On one hand, he acknowledged what he had done. On the other, he expressed regret and even confusion. Some messages hinted at second thoughts, as though he did not fully grasp the consequences of his actions until it was too late. Defense attorneys have already signaled they will highlight these inconsistencies, suggesting that while Robinson may have acted with planning, his mental state was clouded, conflicted, and unstable. That tension between evidence of premeditation and signs of confusion is likely to become one of the central debates in court. More broadly, the discovery of both the note and the digital evidence has reignited conversations about how online spaces can accelerate radicalization. Chat groups, private servers, and encrypted apps create environments where extreme views can fester unchecked. Robinson's case has become an example in discussions about how quickly ideas shared online can spill into real-world violence, leaving investigators to untangle where ideology ends and personal instability begins. The aftermath of the shooting has been just as complex. Political leaders from both parties condemned the violence. Supporters of Kirk grieved the loss of a man they saw as a leader. Even critics emphasized that political disagreement should never cross into violence. But alongside genuine grief came a flood of misinformation. Within hours, conspiracy theories spread online. Some claimed the shooter wasn't Robinson at all. Others speculated about hidden accomplices or shadowy political plots. Foreign media outlets in Russia, China, and Iran were accused of amplifying false narratives, hoping to deepen divisions in the United States. Experts warned that this blizzard of misinformation would make it harder for the public to separate fact from fiction. Security at political events has also come under scrutiny. How was a shooter able to access a rooftop within range of the stage? Were security sweeps inadequate? Could this have been prevented with tighter planning? These questions remain open, and they point to larger concerns about the safety of public discourse in America. In Washington, lawmakers across the spectrum issued statements of shock. The president called the attack a cowardly assault on free expression, while members of Congress, both Republican and Democrat, emphasized that America must never normalize violence as a political response. For Kirk's allies within Turning Point USA, the moment was devastating. Staff described him as not only their leader, but their mentor and friend. The organization quickly organized memorials, candlelight vigils, and digital tributes across campuses. On the ground in Utah, the university community was shaken. Students who had been in the crowd described sleepless nights, counseling sessions, and difficulty processing what they had witnessed. Professors canceled classes in the immediate aftermath, while the administration worked with mental health professionals to provide support. For many young people, this was their first time directly experiencing the fallout of political violence. The ripple effects extended far beyond Utah. Media outlets debated what the tragedy meant for political discourse. Conservative voices argued it reflected growing hostility toward their movement, while progressive commentators warned against framing one act as a reflection of all political opposition. The public conversation quickly became polarized, with each side pointing to the incident as evidence of deeper national dysfunction. Meanwhile, security professionals were blunt. Analysts explained that open-air venues are notoriously difficult to secure, especially when rooftops and high vantage points surround the crowd. While Secret Service-level precautions were not in place, Kirk was not a government official. Some experts argued that prominent political figures, especially polarizing ones, should receive more structured security planning. Others countered that over-securing campus events risks stifling the very openness that makes them valuable. In the digital sphere, misinformation continued to swirl. Fake social media accounts pushed theories of multiple shooters, while doctored images circulated purporting to show different suspects. Authorities pleaded with the public to rely on official updates, but in an age of instant sharing, falsehoods often spread faster than corrections. This added yet another layer of complexity to the tragedy, turning an already painful event into a battle over truth itself. In the days that followed, another major reaction came from the media industry itself. ABC Network suspended Jimmy Kimmel Live indefinitely over remarks Jimmy Kimmel made about the political response to Charlie Kirk's death. Nexstar and Sinclair, two large ABC affiliates, pulled the show from their stations, calling Kimmel's comments insensitive and saying they did not want to air programming that they viewed as politicizing such a recent tragedy. FCC Chair Brendan Carr weighed in too, warning of regulatory consequences. The show's usual slot was replaced in many markets with reruns of Celebrity Family Feud, while ABC considers next steps. For many, this move raised urgent questions. Where is the line between free speech and responsibility in commentary about violence? When broadcast hosts make controversial statements, what accountability do networks have? And who decides? The suspension of a major late-night show over comments tied to the case showed just how deeply Charlie Kirk's death has rippled through politics, media, and regulation. As of now, Robinson awaits trial. His father's decision to persuade him to surrender spared the community a prolonged manhunt or potential violent standoff. But the case itself is far from over. Prosecutors will argue premeditation, planning, and ideological motive. Defense attorneys may push back, raising questions about his mental state or the reliability of certain digital evidence. The broader implications are unavoidable. Charlie Kirk's assassination highlights the growing danger of political violence in a deeply polarized nation. It forces a reckoning over how we secure public events, how we address radicalization in online spaces, and how we draw the line between free speech and dangerous rhetoric. For Kirk's family, friends, and supporters, the loss is deeply personal. He leaves behind a wife, young children, and a movement that will feel his absence. For the nation, his passing is both a tragedy and a warning. Charlie Kirk's life ended suddenly on a September afternoon, but the questions it raises will linger for years. Was this the result of one young man's radicalization? Was it fueled by online communities that thrive on division? Or was it something even more complex? What do you think this case reveals about the state of politics in America today? Was it ideological extremism, online influence, or simply one man's choice to resort to violence? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this breakdown helped you understand the case, please like this video, share it, and subscribe to True Crime Stories for more in-depth coverage.